Hi, I'm Jessica, and when I'm not drinking all the coffee, watching Razorback sports, or hanging out with my family of boys, it's my passion to help elementary music teachers just like you find your unique teaching style. My goal with this podcast is to share helpful tips, strategies, and to give you the motivation you need to gain momentum in your teaching so you can continue being the music teacher rock star you already are. Well, hey there, friend. Welcome to episode 99 of the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Today's episode is with Dr. Michael Ruybalid, and he is going to be sharing about the importance of early childhood music. One of my favorite things he told me is how when he's working with music education majors, he doesn't just have them do their regular elementary and secondary music placements, which obviously are important, but he also has them go into a daycare to help these kiddos learn music as well. He talks about why he does that, his strategy behind it, and how he has these students do that. So in this episode, you'll hear me talk about my story when I got asked to teach pre-K music for the first time. And I felt like I've told you guys before that teaching kindergarten music is a totally different world of its own, but pre-K is like, I would say, a different planet altogether. Anyways, he shares about strategies to teach pre-K music, how to pull from the Kodály, Orff-Schulwerk, and music learning theory trainings and adapt it for early childhood music, and different other ideas that he has around this. And you are in for a treat today because he has so much to share about this. He is the music education specialist at the University of Montana. He teaches courses in undergrad and graduate music education and supervises student teachers in their general music placements. Dr. Ruybalid earned his PhD in music education from the University of Oklahoma and currently holds Kodály certification levels 1 through 3, Orff-Schulwerk levels 1 through 3, and a masterclass, and elementary level 1 certification, and Dr. Edwin Gordon's music learning theory. He previously taught music education coursework at the University of Maryland and Southeastern Louisiana University. Prior to entering higher education, he taught pre-K through 12th music for 8 years in both private and public schools in the San Francisco Bay Area. Dr. Ruybalid has presented pedagogical and research sessions for local, national, and international audiences, including several conference sessions on early childhood music. So like I said, if early childhood music is something you're passionate about, you know you're going to be asked to teach preschool music or pre-K music at some point, then this episode is going to tremendously help you. And in this conversation, we also talk about elementary music too. So stay tuned for that. Let's go ahead and jump right in with today's episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. I already introduced him in the intro, but I am joined today by Michael, and I'm so excited to have him today. And so, Michael, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself a little bit more to the audience, and then we will get started with talking about early childhood music today.
Sure. So thanks for having me, by the way. I'm originally from the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and my teaching career started in teaching general music, K6. It was a K6 school there, and taught for 6 years. That's when I got introduced to Kodály, because Holy Names, which is a big Kodály center, is actually where I didn't do my master's when I left my first full-time teaching job and went ahead and did that, and that's when I got introduced to that teaching approach. After I did my master's, I made the leap to my PhD, went to OU, Oklahoma, in Norman, in music education. And around that same time, I also jumped on the on Orff levels and did my Orff levels when I was there. That was my first introduction to music learning theory. One of my professors there worked with Dr. Gordon at South Carolina. So that's when I first learned about music learning theory. I've done a level in that in elementary. I've made the leap to various universities, taught at the University in Louisiana for 3 years, taught at the University of Maryland for a year, and now I'm in Montana at the University of Montana. So I coordinate the music education program here. I teach the general methods. I supervise student teachers. I teach some of the graduate courses in music ed. And I, on the side here, I work with a daycare on campus. I go there once a week, do classes with them. I've worked that in as a field experience for my general methods students, and that's what I do. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so when we were talking about having you on the podcast, you could have honestly come on here and talked about anything because you are, you're very so knowledgeable about so many different topics. But talking about early childhood music, one thing that you told me you did and that you just mentioned as well is when you work with a daycare, you work with them in music, and you also help your students in college with early childhood music. And I think that's amazing. And I think back to my experience, and pre-K got added at my school that I used to teach at, that it was like kind of a new program, and they're just like, I want you to teach pre-K. The pre-K kiddos are going to start coming to your room. And I was like, what? I had never, you'd think it would be not intimidating because you're like, well, if I can do K through 5th, I can do pre-K too. Oh no, they came in and it was a totally different thing for me. And so I think what you do with working with music education majors and helping them get ready to teach early childhood music is a good thing, because honestly, you just never know. You never know. And I think having that in their bag is going to be huge for them. So I want to start out by asking you, why do you feel like teaching music even to the youngest of kids is so important?
So when I was thinking about this question, I immediately jumped to a comment, or I think it was in an interview Kodály gave. I don't know when, but I guess he was asked, when should music education begin? And I think he originally said 9 months before the child is born. And then I guess he corrected himself at some point later and said, no, 9 months before the birth of the mother, which I think his point was, it should begin as early as possible. And in thinking about, when the cuts usually come down in states, and I'm from the state of California, and I've seen that happen at least twice in my lifetime. I don't think I had a general music teacher, to be quite honest with you. I was in elementary school in the 80s, and I think that's when some of the cuts came down. I mean, I don't know for certain if I did, but I don't. If I did, I don't remember this person, so I'm thinking I didn't. And then, in around the in the late 2000s, like 2008, in the economic downturn, we were seeing teacher cuts come down, and I just see that as such the foundation of a child's music learning. And I originally taught elementary too. And in my part-time teaching, when I was working on my master's, I was doing an after-school program at a church, and I was honestly just looking for extra income. And the music pastor said, we have preschool on campus. Go talk to them, see if they need something. So, and I was doing some early childhood classes through my Kodály masters. They brought in a early childhood person from Hungary, and I got really interested in it. And so I did, and I discovered the same thing. It's very different. It's not kindergarten. It's not kindergarten. Well, even down to because as a kindergarten, when I taught kindergarten, I would even say to the teachers would leave. They would leave me with them, and I was fine with that. And so I would look at the preschool teachers, and I went, well, you can leave if you need me to just be by myself, if you need a break. And they said, oh no, we need to stay. I think it might have been a California law that I think there had to be one adult for every 7 or 9 children. There were 30. So they stayed. And so even things like that, but yeah, how you work with them. I jokingly say to my undergrads, I said, if you do something with turn taking, you be prepared to give them all a turn in some way, or else you'll probably have anarchy on your hands. And I just find that preschool need that over kindergarten. So yeah, I learned how they were very different. When I got to OU and started my doctorate and started learning about music learning theory and Dr. Ed Gordon's work, he, in his writings, talks about aptitude, musical aptitude, and how everybody's born with some level of musical aptitude. And I'm still learning about music learning theory a lot too, so I don't find myself to be the foremost expert. I'm still reading about it. I'm still taking trainings in it. But my understanding of what he was saying was everybody's born with some level of musical aptitude, but it tends to stabilize by about age 9. And so the importance of early musical experiences with children is paramount, and it's very important. So in learning that, and also at OU, when I was there, my first semester, that was my first semester not teaching young kids. I was now teaching college students. And I met Wendy Sims from Mizzou. She came and did a guest lecture. And I went up to her and I said, how do you keep yourself, and I'm trying to remember, this conversation was 10 years ago. So, Dr. Sims, if you're listening and I'm forgetting some of this conversation, forgive me. But what I took from it was, I asked her, how do you keep yourself, fresh, like with teaching kids? Like you're teaching teachers how to teach children. And she said, I go and work with children at a daycare on campus. And so at OU, we had an early childhood institute. So I went down there and worked, and I brought students there. And then, and I tell the students, I do that because I want to know that what I tell you works still works. Because children have such a wonderful knack of showing you what's not working.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. And then when I got to Southeastern in Louisiana, they had a lab school on campus. I did the same thing. I brought students there. I taught down there. They had a music teacher. And she would just say, whenever you want to come in, I will gladly, relinquish the kids to you. So, and then at Maryland, they had a Center for Young Children. They did the same thing. And then Southeastern, Montana, where I'm at now, has 2 daycares on campus, and I work with one of them weekly. And so, yeah, it just kind of keeps me honest. And I even ask the students, as a quick aside, I try to ask them on occasion, so do you have any suggestions for me? And they do give me a puzzled look. But I'm like, yeah, you're the third person observers. What do you think didn't work? Or what do you think worked? Or why, ask me why I did something. So,
yeah.
And so I do, but back to why it's important is I am already seeing, as I'm working with them, some responses back, and it helps me kind of put theory into practice. Like, for example, I don't expect the children to respond, right away, especially the infants. This daycare has got down to like children who aren't even walking yet. And I don't look for a response right away. When I get one, I try to pull from it. Like if I get like a siren sound, or I get something that sounds like they're trying to totally react back to me, I will respond back to them and see if I can kind of encourage that. But patience is the game, I find, with kids. It's kind of a crock pot mentality with them, to kind of give them that chance to kind of listen to you, babble back, and then eventually start to kind of figure out how they can, respond to you in a way that's purposeful.
I love that. Oh my goodness. I think this is so important. And I want you to encourage your music ed students that when they say, why is this important? I'm just going to be an elementary music teacher. No, going back to, they're laying the foundation and they're learning as they go. But also, like I said, they never know if they're going to be asked to teach a preschool or pre-K music class. It happens all the time where
I was asked to.
Yeah, exactly. I even know there's some schools that have a 3-year-old program. And so all of a sudden you're like, teach these kids, and you're like, what? How am I supposed to do this? And so I know that from talking to you before we even started having a conversation on the podcast, you told me that you like to pull from Kodály, Orff-Schulwerk, and music learning theory levels, with even helping your students with preschool music. And so I would love for you to just share ideas behind that. What do you include in your curriculum? How or why do you include it too?
And I will say, Dalcroze is missing from that conversation, and I just haven't had any real formal, dedicated experience in Dalcroze. It's on my bucket list. Part of why I'm going through all the different approaches is because they're out there. I want some practical experience in them. I find, especially with music learning theory, as a quick aside, I needed that 2-week dedicated training in it, because I was like, oh, that's what he meant. That's what he meant. Because if you or your listeners have read any of Dr. Gordon's writings, they can be dense. They can be quite dense, and they go over your head. And even when I have my students read a little bit of his work or about him and his research, and they come back to me, they're like, and I can just kind of see the puzzled look on their faces, and I'm like, yeah, I'm still like that. And that's why I am so glad that some of those who have worked with him directly are starting to come out with chapters and podcasts and trying to explain his work, because I believe it's really important. But with Dalcroze, I'm sure there's connections. I've taken some workshops in that. I just haven't, but I plan to at some point try to find a summer where I can go do a Dalcroze training.
Right.
But anyway, I'll go in order, because when I started in early childhood, Kodály was the only training I had. And it was around the time when I was doing my master's, and I worked with a preschool. And I would say probably what I mainly pull probably from this, there's probably some teaching techniques, but they're starting to kind of blend a little bit because I've gotten trainings in so many, is the folk materials. And what materials can I utilize at that level? And I will say also with John Feyerabend's work, I pulled from his materials and from his research. And it's some of the same materials, some of the same folk materials. And I know from him especially, I've learned sing to them, not with them. So let them hear it, let them take it in as much as possible. So I am okay if they don't sing with me. In fact, I try not to encourage them to right away, because I also don't want them to learn it wrong, because with young children, as probably your listeners have experienced, if they learn something wrong, good luck undoing it. I even jokingly say to my undergrads, wrong, it's not right. Wrong will become the new right, because they have a hard time unlearning something. And so I let them hear. So that usually involves a lot of, storytelling, where I'll tell them a story or sing them a story, children's literature. Orff came next, and one of my Orff teachers in my levels, I've done with the 3 levels that I did, worked with early childhood as well. And I learned kind of the importance of really the playful aspect of things. And so the movement aspect, she was my movement teacher. And also how to modify activities. I know we might talk at some point about one of the sessions I've presented on looking at it through these various lenses. And part of what I bring up in that session, in fact, that session was a co-creation of mine between me and Christina Sveck, who teaches at Iowa State, is how you can adapt activities for early childhood. Like one example I'll give, which I learned from one of my Orff teachers. There's a dance called 7 Jumps. It's on one of the Shenanigans CDs, and I think it's also in Phyllis Whiteker's book. And it was modified to be entirely non-locomotor and with just very simple movements. And it's something that I learned in my movement class in level 1, or from the teacher, since I've been bringing her up a lot, Victoria Redford Cave is who I had for movement for all 3 levels. She teaches out in Virginia. And just how to modify activities to not to water them down or dumb them down, but to make them developmentally appropriate. And I don't think I would do a folk dance right away with just the children that has some movement involved. I might modify it later in the process of saying, okay, we did it now this way. Now I can kind of teach you in this process teaching, which is so important in Orff teaching. And making a movement activity. Also, one thing we bring up in that session is, because a lot of what we were talking about with early childhood was parent and toddler or parent and child classes, was it can be the same folk dance, but now it's the partner is parent and child.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So, and kind of encouraging that connection between parent and child. And then music learning theory, because he did so much writing, and I mean, he has a whole book called MLT for newborn and young children, which I have actually on the table here right now next to me. And back to the whole piece of aptitude and kind of, you know, how important that is, and how important music education is for the young children. Kind of, Dr. Gordon equated the learning of music to the learning of language. And children hear language orally so much from how young they are, they don't get that similar education on the musical side. So when my materials that I pull from for music learning theory is he talks about you need to sing to them and chant to them in a variety of tonalities and a variety of meters. Do I expect the infant or toddler to be able to sing in Dorian? No. Do I sing to them in Dorian and Phrygian and Mixolydian and Locrian in mixed meter? Yes. So, because you want them to hear that, and from as early as possible. And I'm upfront with my undergrad. I was totally not comfortable with modes in undergrad. I didn't become comfortable until my master's degree. And so I say that to them because I'm sure some of them are like, I'm not comfortable singing in Dorian. I'm not comfortable singing in Mixolydian. But so I'm trying to work into my curriculum with them on how to get them more comfortable. And I'm still kind of working that out. So that's kind of what I pull from them. And then also one thing Dr. Gordon brings up is singing to them with and without text, because they hear language so much that when you sing to them with songs that just have words or have words with them as well with the melodies, the child may focus more on the text because that's what they're hearing in language. And so singing things on neutral syllables, and so they can focus on the tonality.
Yeah. One thing you said that I guess I never kind of put the puzzle pieces together is with preschool kids, you do read to them. They don't know how to read yet. I mean, some of them maybe, but most kids don't learn to read until, I know with my own children, they don't usually learn to read till the end of kindergarten. And so with preschool kids, like you said, I never had this aha moment until actually right now, so thank you. But when you said they don't have to always sing with you, sometimes they can just respond to music or hear it. And I think, like I said, because teaching preschool music is so, unfamiliar to me, I think I was so focused on teaching them the same way I would elementary students and wanting them to participate and sing with me and even echo sing like you do with kindergarten, but sometimes the preschoolers wouldn't even do that and I'd be frustrated. But like you said, it's okay for them to, I want people listening to hear this, that it's okay if they are just hearing you sing, if they're just experiencing music and listening to it and moving to it. And like you said, even with modified movement. So one thing I want to ask you is when it comes to teaching elementary music, and let's say a teacher's listening to this and they've been asked to teach preschool or pre-K music too, what are the biggest differences, I guess, you see? Is it that where it's just your teaching approaches are a little bit different because of the how you present the music to them, would you say? Or I don't know, what are some pieces of advice you give your college students around that?
I know because they work with the toddlers and the pre-K. I didn't have to work with the infant because the infant class is so different because I don't gather the infants to sit like the toddlers and the pre-K do. I just go in and sit in the room and I interact with whoever comes to me. And I will go to the kid and interact with them and make eye contact with them and sing to them. That's one thing, is to not expect them to sing right away. And also even with primary age kids, because I would get frustrated as a young teacher going, why is that child not reacting? Or why are they not singing? And I'll never forget, this might have actually been when I was at OU and I had a 5-year-old who hardly ever responded. They paid attention. And then I had a parent come to me and say, what is this? Oh, what songs did I do? The only one that comes to mind is I Know an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly, because I would sing that book to them. What is this I Know an Old Lady song you're teaching them? And I'm like, how do you know that song? She says, my daughter will not stop singing it in the car.
Aww.
So the daughter may not have responded at all in the room, but then like you get her in the car seat, Actually, one of my colleagues here at UM, her children are at this daycare or both her children were there last year. And her daughter was particularly focused, but quiet. And then I'm sitting in a coffee shop working, because that's where I do my best work. And I get a text from her. It's a video of her daughter singing the melody of a book that I have been singing to them. She never sang that to me in front of the rest of the kids, but get her home on her kitchen table. So, but that's when she was ready for it. And so I encourage the idea of patience, and also that's sometimes how they take it in, is they just need to take it in, and then they'll sing it. They'll respond to it when they're ready. And with also, I don't let them sing too early, because I don't want them to learn it incorrectly, because they may not be able to take the whole toll in.
Yeah, that's true.
Later, I will start to do that. I do pattern work. That's another thing that's especially within the music learning theory materials that I've learned about, where you sing like a 3 or 4 note pattern in the tonality you're singing, like bum, bum, bum. And I will give the children the opportunity to echo it back to me in the pre-K room. And I'm just listening for, accuracy. I don't harp on it if it's incorrect. I just will let them respond back. And some of them are able to echo it back correctly, some aren't. And it's just it's also showing them an easy way of assessment that they can even use in the elementary side. And I will do it rhythmically too. Like if it's a chant, one I can think of that is something I learned is, my mother, your mother, away. Every night they have a chat, and this is what they say. And then it's echoed patterns back, ba, 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 and I'll have the children respond back to me. And then I'll have an individual pattern that I will look at any children who want to respond to me individually. I'll let them. So I'll still let them respond back to me. And like I'll do ba, 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 might be my individual pattern, and then I'll see if any children, they'll raise their hand if they want to respond back. Or I will say, like, if I look at one of them and say, would you like to respond back to me? And sometimes I'll get a child that goes, no, thank you. That's fine, because I also talk to my undergrads about this heavily, never force a child.
Yeah, that's good.
Never force the child to respond, to participate in a certain way, because you don't want them walking out of your room that they hate it.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I like how you said that. Well, and I even think that can apply to elementary music students. What you said is, with the example you gave about the child singing in her car seat. And I think about elementary music students even, where you sometimes can feel defeated as a teacher, because you're a music teacher, because you're like, why is this particular kid not singing? Or why are they not wanting to participate with this movement or instrument activity or whatever you're doing in the music room that day? But you never know if that child is doing that at home, or sharing it with their brothers and sisters, or showing something to their parents, or singing it outside, when they're playing with their friends. You don't know. And so it's about planting seeds and knowing that it goes back to every child learns differently. That's why there's so many different learning styles, and some kids are quicker to respond than others, and some, they just need a little bit more time and patience, like you said. So I think what you said can definitely apply to the youngest of babies all the way up through whatever grade you're teaching. So one thing I wanted to ask you about is, you have mentioned this conference that you have taught before, or presented at, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and about early childhood teaching through the 3 lenses. And so just kind of want to pick your brain about that, and to share with anybody anything that you shared at that conference you think would be relevant for our listeners.
One thing that, perhaps your listeners are thinking right now is, I don't teach pre-K, which is not everywhere. And certainly our certification in Montana is K-12, and I'm upfront with the students and saying pre-K is close to kindergarten, but it's not the same. So, and they do have field experiences that they do prior to student teaching, and they all have to funnel through a general music at some point, whether it's field experience or student teaching. But I tell them it's not the exact same, but it's what's available to us on campus. And they may get asked, because we are seeing some elementary's pre-K is getting added to the site, and it may be expected of them to teach it. I might have talked about this already, but one thing that Dr. Speck and I bring up in our session, whether we both presented it separately at conferences and we both presented it together, is the idea of modifying the activities. Like I talked about the folk dance idea earlier, where it was modified to be non-locomotor, because the 7 jumps, if you look in the shenanigans materials, it's a circle dance, where they're doing, like, I think they're traveling, and then they create, there might be some partner work. See, I've taught it the modified way for so long, I can't even remember what the original was.
Yeah.
And then eventually you could, as they grow up older, if you keep them from pre-K up to 5th grade, you can eventually get to the original dance. One caveat I will say with modification, and this is just my Kodály brain talking, is these materials are folk materials, and they're from somebody's heritage. And so sometimes you just don't want to modify just to modify. You want to make sure you know what the original intent of the activity is. And so if it's got some kind of cultural significance to modify that, might almost be viewed as insulting. So, because sometimes these things are so close to somebody's folk heritage, they're so close and near dear to their heart. So it's knowing the classroom and knowing what materials you have. So I always try to make sure I'm careful when I'm taking something that's from somebody's heritage and just changing it. Because it may have a significance the original way. But knowing also that some of these materials have been modified and changed over the decades, because that's in Kodály, we call that different variants on songs or on chants or on dances. And so it might be okay, especially when you start to think about how to change it up to fit within a pre-K context or a primary context. Like, I may not do a folk dance the original way with a 2nd grade because I may not be ready for it, but I could do it with 5th grade, but I can modify it. Teach it this way in 2nd grade, and as they're getting older, I can slowly kind of change the process up to where they learn the original. So that's one thing I could probably reiterate, because I know some people probably even walk into that session going, okay, I'm going to pull some things from this, but I don't teach pre-K. And so something that the connection that I could probably make better. When Kodály teaching, and I know also within music learning theory, in Kodály we talked about the idea of preparation, and like it's in Kodály, usually part of your sequence is to kind of make conscious or present to them the labeling of certain musical elements, whether it's tonal solfege, like, sol mi and la, within a melodic context, or ta ti ti or do do day, whatever rhythmic system you use. And early childhood allows for that opportunity of extended preparation. So you can be preparing them for months, if not years, to hear these melodies, hear these songs, because I do tell the undergrads, when you present a tonal element, the song you're pulling it out of a context, and they need to know that song cold. So if they can't sing that song accurately and in tune, then they can't accurately be able to figure out, oh, that's so me. They can't hear that accurately. So early childhood allows for that extended preparation.
Yeah.
And Gordon even talks about, with movement, we're sometimes so quick to want to get them to move in a purposeful way, like with showing the beat or showing the rhythm. And he really emphasizes the idea of free-flowing movement, because think about the expression that models to them. Like when you're moving in free-flowing movement as you're singing, how that can show musical expression, and then they can start to kind of imitate that back to you. And then think about how that would help us as adult musicians when we're moving as we sing, when we're playing the violin, when a conductor is conducting, how they're showing kind of that flowing movement. And so don't be too quick to want to get them to showing beat and rhythm, because you want to kind of model that flowing movement with them. So, and you can do that even in kindergarten but think about how much readiness you can build into them if they do this musical readiness even earlier, even before they hit the kindergarten age.
Yeah, completely. Oh my goodness. That was so, so helpful. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I have loved having you on the podcast and I appreciate all your insight. But I want to ask you before we go, do you have anything, I know you've already said so much, but any closing remarks or advice you want to give to elementary music teachers listening today about what we talked about, or even anything else that you would encourage them with?
Well, I know I've already talked about, be patient. And I think probably those who are out in the schools see that, although I didn't know that when I first taught, that I didn't need to rush things so much, that the preparation of musical elements takes time. Also, and we're recording this in a time of school closure.
Yeah.
A lot is falling on the role of the parent as the teacher. This is not to say that I've seen lots of conversation right now with how music teachers are going to stay connected with their kids, with their students, now that schools are not meeting that's in person. But a lot is going to fall on the role of the parent as teacher, and consider how you can still be musical with your children, with children at home. How you can encourage the parents to do that. I actually did put out some Facebook posts last night to some of my friends who teach them, like, how are you sharing like musical activities? How do you do that? How do you send musical activities home so that this musical connections that you're making, whether it's from a parent toddler class or even in kindergarten, and some of them are like sharing like listening examples, like, you can listen to this music and you can move to it. You can. There's the songs we sing. You can sing it with your kids. Here's the recording. Back in 10 years ago, that was sending home a CD. Well, that tends to be gone away.
Yeah, I know.
But the music teachers may be sharing some ideas online, and how to list music to listen to. So I would, maybe right now, even when we get back to school, like how can you encourage that connection to home? So music is not something that just lives at school, because I would say, especially with Kodály's comment with 9 months before, Dr. Gordon's work, parents are the earliest teachers. And so when we equate learning of music to the learning of language, we're orally sharing language with the kids. How can we orally share music with them as well? And I will say, as a quick aside, music learning theory is something that's very hard to get our heads wrapped around. And one great podcast has actually just come out. My friend Heather Schulwerk has come out with a podcast called Everyday Musicality, and she's got a website, and her podcast is all about music learning theory, and she unpacks things so well. She spent a whole 20 minutes on what audiation is and what it's not.
Oh, awesome! Yeah.
What are we talking about? What are we talking about with aptitude? Like what is that referring to? And so, and I really think she does a really great job unpacking some things in there. So, and I think that's a recent addition to the podcast world.
Yeah, definitely should check that out. Oh, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been so super helpful, even for me, just getting some insights from you about why early childhood music is important, and how to teach it, how to not be intimidated to teach it, and just to encourage elementary music teachers listening that you can do it. It's just like with anything else, if it's new to you, I think just getting in there and doing it and trying and being okay to mess up, but learn from your mistakes and to keep going. I think that's important to remember that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've appreciated you being a guest, and I look forward to everybody hearing what you've had to say.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, I would love for you to review the show and leave a rating on iTunes. To find out more about how I can help you gain momentum in your elementary music teaching career, head to thedomesticmusician.com, where you'll find free downloads, courses, the blog, and so much more. Continue teaching music and never doubt the impact you're making each and every day in the lives of your students.